I rolled out and my body was still there. And I turned around and I went, oh my God, I did it. And then I floated around the bedroom and walked through the door. I walked in and my wife was at the top of the spiral stairs looking down, and she was completely flabbergasted. Like, what are you doing here? You shouldn't be here.
I am here today with John Novello, and he is an acclaimed jazz pianist, Amazon #1 best-selling author, motivational speaker, and elite perfect life one-on-one mentor. He's also had a shared death experience, some after-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, and I guess what you would call premonitions or foreknowledge. So he's had a lot of different spiritual experiences throughout his life. And today we're going to learn more about his story. So, John, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure. Love to chat about this subject.
Me too. So let's start at the beginning. You were a child when you first heard the invisible voice speak to you. Could you tell us about that experience?
Yes, at that point, I didn't have a name for what was happening. I was 3 years old and sitting in the living room, and a TV show came on, and there was an accordion player. I grew up in an Italian Catholic family. There was an accordion player playing, and all I knew at that point, in hindsight, to me, it's a pre-birth situation. I saw the keyboard and the invisible architect, which is my name for God, but I kind of like to use a different name so it's not associated with various other isms and ologies. That was just a voice I heard in my head. And I pointed to the keyboard. Only, not that I wanted to take lessons or not, but it was just a keyboard that obviously permeated the veil of amnesia for me. And I went, Dad. So they figured that that meant me taking accordion lessons. And later on in life, I did. And that sparked my music career. But in actual fact, it was sort of a past life experience coming through as far as playing the keyboard. And I recognized it at 3, and I just kind of pointed to it. And from then on in, I've always had this clear voice speaking to me for knowledge, information, decisions. And eventually I learned how to channel it. And all the way up to present time, now I've written a whole book about it. And I show people how to hook up with this, I like to call it the quantum intelligent energy field that permeates everything and us and is the architect of everything. And I've written a book on that, The Invisible Architect, How to Design Your Perfect Life, where I explain how I interacted from 3 years old with this intelligent energy and all the fundamentals that helped me achieve a successful life, and how I can help other people do the same thing using this intelligent energy.
That's amazing. And so you had your first experience with this when you were 3 years old, and you said it was more like a pre-birth memory coming through. Had you had experience as a musician in a previous life, or was it more like a pre-birth planning that you remembered?
Well, it's actually both. In hindsight, it was definitely a pre-birth planning, but yes, in several other lifetimes, I was a musician and didn't think I was going to do it again. And now I've got a double life going because I did it again musically. And now I'm an author and a mentor, and I didn't even plan on that. And that we'll get into that, I'm sure.
Okay, that's fascinating. So you didn't plan in your pre-birth plan to be an author and a mentor?
I don't recall that if I had. The music thing was definitely there. But one day I woke up about 4.5 years ago, and like I said, I've always had this connection, and the voice, which I had already didn't even have a name for yet, said, you need to write a book. I mean, I've already written other books. We'll talk about that later. So I went, oh, not another book. I'm like talking to the architects. I know how much work that is, And it said, no, you need to pay it forward. And I kind of went, what do you mean? Well, you've been interacting with me since you've been 3 years old, and we've been a good team, right? And I said, yeah. He goes, well, it's time to share, time to pay it forward, and I'll help you. And I fought it for about a month, because I was busy as a musician. And then one day I actually sat down and started writing an outline, because that's the only way to write a book is to write a bit of an outline. And then that piqued my interest and I got into it. And I did still have a name. I knew it had to do with spirituality and mindset principles and things like that. But it's hard for me to write without a name. And one day I was on the computer, and on the side, you got all these different advertisements that always pop up online. And there was an advertisement by an architect, and his type of architect was called invisible architecture. And when I read about it, it was a type of architecture that just blended in. So he calls it invisible architecture. But the invisible architect, the energy source, was kind of like going, duh, like trying to get me to realize that that's why that thing appeared there. And I went, oh, architect. Yeah, architect is something that creates things, and God is invisible. Oh, invisible. That's what you want me to call the book. And it was like, yeah. And that's the moment I had the name, then everything just started channeling like crazy.
Oh, that's amazing. So the name was kind of given to you, I guess, and then you wrote the outline, and then after that, if I'm understanding you correctly, you channeled the book. What was that like?
Yeah, and I've had experience with allowing God, the invisible architect, the intelligent energy field. I've had experience all my life surrendering to that energy and allowing it to express itself through me, as long as I invited it, because it gives us free will. So I had a lot of experience. Every time I played, I'd go into what I call the zone, and it would be almost as if like I would be watching my hands play from a distance when I was in the zone. And so I knew when that was happening, the architect was expressing itself through me. And I always played incredible when I allowed that to happen. And so once I got the title, the name, and the outline, I knew that all I had to do was match frequencies, as I call it, and it would do the rest. And all of a sudden, that's just started flowing out, and I didn't have any blockages of sorts. It just kept coming out. And I was almost like going, are you done yet?
Okay, so this is really interesting. You're talking about being in the zone or in the flow state, I've heard it called, where artists and actors and sports players will get into this state where they're so fully present into the moment. They're not thinking about, can I make this shot, or can I create this piece of art? They're just in flow with the universe as it unfolds through them. And I personally believe that this is the next big evolutionary step for humanity, to be able to enter this flow state of consciousness and maintain it and live from that space. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, not only is that a great way of saying it, but that's exactly what the architect meant when it said, I need to pay it forward. Because I don't know if you remember a book called The Celestine Prophecy, and it was a book about a guy that went to Peru for some spiritual lessons. And the author, James Redfield, I believe, in the book, he says mankind has gradually disassociated and separated itself from source, the energy, right? And to the degree that we do that, we become weaker and weaker, because we aren't the power. We are the distributor of the power. And so what you were saying is mankind, one by one, has to eventually get back to being connected up. So I feel that was the architect's way of giving me a new goal besides music, because music is entertaining and inspirational, and it raises people's frequency. And I've been blessed with talent and the courage to practice, right? But at the end of the day, people still have to go back to their life after the concert or whatever. And I'm excited about this new authorship / one-on-one mentoring, because the whole idea is to hook people up with source, the energy, and show them how they can use that energy source to achieve and design a better life. And so I actually feel for the first time I'm on a bit of a humanity service to others, because every person that I contacted, I can help raise their frequency to do this and get in that zone, creates a better life for them. And of course, logistically, that creates a better life for planet Earth. And God knows we need something like that now.
Yes, yes, for sure. So I do want to move into your spiritual experiences here soon, but while we're on this topic, I have to ask you, do you have any, like, just a couple tips for people on how to move into this zone or this flow state?
Yes. A lot of times biblically, people talk about surrendering. I used to hate that word because I always thought about it being weak.
Yeah, me too.
But so I don't like that word. But what it is, and when I do one-on-one mentoring, there's 8 milestones that I have to achieve with a person to get them to the state. But the first one is they have to understand that even though they don't have experience yet, that there is this energy source. So you have to have a little bit of faith initially that there's this energy source. But here's the key. You have to be willing to give up controls to the energy source. I think that's what they meant by surrender, and realize it's the power. You're the distributor of the power. And so you have to, keyword, invite it into your life. For some reason, I don't know if this is all pre-birth and worked out. It's probably all above my pay grade, and I'll know someday. For some reason, we were given free will, right? So this intelligent energy doesn't bypass our free will. Otherwise, what would be the purpose of our existence if it just did everything for us? So it's the general, we are the particular. We have to invite it into our life and then take our desires and trust that it will help create those desires. And, it's like when you're a boss and you hire an employee, you got to let them get on with the job. Let them do it. Don't micromanage them. So I learned that once you give it up and invite, and that's the big tip, it will take over, and you just have to have trust and faith and patience, because in the physical universe, which is a lower raw frequency universe compared to the spiritual thought universe, things take time. So you have to trust that it's orchestrating your life and desires and let it do its job. That's the first most important thing. And it's really hard for us to do because we all are narcissists a little bit and we want to do everything ourselves. You know what I mean?
Yes, yes, I can relate to that so much. I had the same experience because I was raised religious, where I did not like the word surrender because to me it meant control, like surrendering and allowing someone else to control you because I was raised in a controlling environment. But really, I mean, it's so liberating once you experience it. It's like, I mean, it is giving up control, but it's giving up everything that goes along with that control, the contraction and the fear and the anxiety and the like holding on and trying to make it happen.
Yeah. And if you're going to give control up, what better than giving it to God, right? That's the main.
So I would love to hear about your shared death communication with your first wife.
Yeah. My first wife, we were together 20 years and she was an actress and a singer and we were real soulmates. And she got diagnosed with cancer. So the last 2 years we were battling cancer. And when it appeared that she was going to lose her fight and she was getting close to getting into hospice, we were talking. And so we made a little pact that we would try to continue communicating, after death communications. And she agreed and I agreed. And so I was holding her hand and she was laying down in the living room and breathing slowly and slowly. So as you could tell, she was winding down. So I was helping her transition. And she wasn't able to talk at all the last week because the cancer had spread to her brain. So you can imagine, to my surprise, when all of a sudden I got this clear communication from her, and I'm looking at the body and it's unconscious. It's laying there holding the hand, and the communication is coming from the left side upward. And I turned like this, and all of a sudden she goes, John, I'm free of the cancer. Oh my God, it's amazing to be outside of this. It's all true. We are immortal. This is amazing. It's exciting. She just went on and on for about 40 seconds, and her daughters were in the room and they didn't even know what was happening, because I thought everybody was hearing that voice, but it was just me inside my head. And then all of a sudden she stopped talking, and then she took her last breath and she transitioned. And that was so amazing to me, to talk to her, the spirit, knowing that that was her disassociated from the body, exterior from the body, that after she passed and we went through all the arrangements and funeral stuff, and I was starting to grieve, I said, you know what? I'm now obsessed with the afterlife. It's not that I was suicidal, but this life didn't mean much to me. I just wanted to be with her and travel over there and all that kind of stuff. So I must have bought 100 books about after-death communications and the spiritual this and spiritual that and new thought this and everything, and then bought some books on out-of-body experiences and started practicing all that stuff. And one night after I was doing the drills, I rolled out of my body accidentally. I was trying, but nothing was working for over a month. And all of a sudden I felt like I had to go to the bathroom. So I rolled out to go to the bathroom. And when I rolled out, and my body was still there. And I turned around and I went, oh my God, I did it. And then I floated around the bedroom and walked through the door. And I had all these exercises worked out for all my readings. And I went through the door, and my shepherd saw me because he got spooked when me spiritually walked through the door. And when I went through the door, I perceived the molecules, and I was having a good old time. I didn't even want to come back. I didn't even know. And I had walked around for about 10 minutes, and all of a sudden something scared me. And I went right back in the body, and I woke up and I went, oh my God, I did it. And after that experience, you can imagine what a realization it was to finally have 100% belief that we are separate beings with our own energy signature, and that we live separate from our bodies and can move around. That was a big deal. So then I started doing it once, twice, 3 times a week and practicing it. And then one day, this one author said, you know, if you want to visit a loved one, once you're out stably, all you got to do is decide, postulate and think it. And I did. And I did a big whoosh. And next thing I know, I was in this marbleated, high ceiling, big door kind of cathedral. And I walked in, and my wife was at the top of the spiral stairs looking down, and she was completely flabbergasted. Like, what are you doing here? You shouldn't be here. And I was getting mad. I was like, that's not what I wanted to hear you say. I wanted to hear you say, she's, call me John, wow, great. But she was like kind of pushing me back. And so I wasn't allowed to go any further other than saying hi and give her like a spiritual hug. And then I was back in my body.
Oh, wow. I can only imagine what it felt like to see her again.
Yeah, but it was such a tease that I started to become obsessed every night trying to see her. And I did eventually see her and give her an actual hug. And then it was almost like some spirit guide kind of was cutting me off and going, you know what? You need to get back into your present life. You got more work to do. You got more to do. You're getting too obsessed here with this afterlife. And it was almost as like they, spirit guides or ascended masters, were kind of reprimanding me and saying, okay, you had your honey. It's time to get back to work.
Why do you think they do that? Is it because if you stay too long, you might not go back?
You know, I thought about that originally, but I think pre-birth contracts and agreements are so strong that can't really happen. But they want you've got these goals and things that you're supposed to do for spiritual growth. and your attention, they want your attention to go back on those rather than the loss of a loved one. They're already over there, their race is done, and your race isn't done. So what are you doing? You know, it's like, get back to work, kind of like beat you up or something. That's what it felt like. Some people say, well, if you go too far over there, then you'll never come back. And I don't think that they would allow that. I just don't think that that would be a, oh my God, he went too far, he died. I just don't think that's possible.
Okay, that makes sense. Because from their perspective here, our life is so short.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And you're going to have plenty of time to go over there. And probably too, if you're allowed to constantly visit or hang out with them, then it's almost like the addiction. You're not going to be that interested in your life anymore because it is pretty fantastic. You know?
Right. So what is it like over there compared to here?
Well, it's a lot of people say this and it sounds like I'm just regurgitating, but it's realer. The colors and the vibe and the energy and the communications are so much clearer and real that when I got back and, you know, wake up in the body and then you get up and it's like you go, oh, this place is kind of dull, you know? And that makes sense that it would be like that because if we come here to incarnate and to challenge ourselves with various goals and desires to learn various spiritual lessons, I don't think it's supposed to be all fine and dandy, but I think our home is. And so that's our home. I've heard it be called the lobby. Did you ever have Melissa on your show?
I don't think so.
She's amazing. She'd have her on her show. She's been in touch with her spirit guide forever and ever, and she does sessions and she talks about that the place where you leave to come to Earth dimension and the place where you arrive when you pass away, that is commonly known as the lobby, and that's a great name where we all meet when we arrive. And so I think when I crossed over and saw my wife the first time, that was the lobby. And she was there, and then she was saying, okay, you need to go back, you know.
Yeah. So going back to your experience when she was passing, you heard her voice. Was that an audible voice or was it in your mind?
No, it was in my mind. Like I said, nobody else in the room could hear. I thought everybody could hear it. It was so crystal clear, but it was definitely in my mind that I found out later. And it was her voice too. It was definitely, so I don't know how they do that. You know, you're not using the vocal voice box of your body, but the sound sounded as if she was.
Right. Have you had any other communications with her since she transitioned?
A couple dreams she came to me, but after a year, I hooked up with my second wife, and who was my childhood sweetheart at 15. So we had 20 years together. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your viewpoint, she passed away 2.5, not quite 3 years ago. And so I've had communications with her as well. And on my first wife, in the book, The Song That Never Ended, I didn't want to be seen as a wishful thinking husband that couldn't get over a loss. So I hired 9 professional mediums and I did experiments on the phone, first name, so nobody knew who I was. And 8 out of the 9 medium sessions that I had, my first wife came through with things that nobody could have known but me or her, and they're all in the book. So it's fascinating reading.
Wow. Okay. So that's very interesting. Also, I'm so sorry to hear about the loss of your second wife as well.
Yeah, and I realized I've had a couple of Akashic readings and another medium session since my second wife passed, and that it was definitely pre-birth contract planned, and each of those soulmates was something that I agreed to experience for various types of spiritual growth. And as hard as it was, the person that I am now from going through both losses is absolutely amazing compared to the person that I was pre-losses. So that's how I also know that they were pre-birth agreements. And so, yeah, I've been in touch with my second wife who passed 2.5 years ago on multiple occasions.
Okay, so we'll get to the story of what happened with your second wife, but since you brought it up, I want to ask you more about your pre-birth plan. That was something that you had in an Akashic reading?
Well, I discovered I already knew I had enough spiritual IQ to know that what they were about, because I had been a student of philosophy and metaphysics and everything for years as a side hobby while I was being a musician.
Mhm.
Because being a musician and mastering an instrument and communication at that high level takes a lot. And so on the side, studying philosophy and metaphysics was very helpful to my music career, which is why I didn't know that I was sort of prefacing my authorship career, because all those studies came into play when I wrote the new book, The Invisible Architect: How to Design Your Perfect Life from Within. So I knew about that, but then I went and had a few Akashic readings and a couple more medium sessions after my second wife passed away, which corroborated all of that. Excuse me.
Okay, interesting. So you mentioned that you were shown that both of your relationships with your wives were soul contracts. Were you shown anything else about your pre-birth plan?
Yeah, the music was definitely, I wanted to come back and finish music because in another lifetime I had done music a couple lifetimes, and for some reason I didn't feel fulfilled. And when I was doing pre-soul agreements, I asked if I could do that again. And the times I did it before, it wasn't jazz. This is jazz. So I became a jazz musician, which I really enjoyed. And every time I played, almost like Mozart or Bach or Beethoven, the music just channeled from the creator. And I realized it was expressing itself through me and my talents. And after a while, it was so exciting that every time I played, it was such a spiritual experience. It wasn't just like me playing, it was like me watching my hands play the keyboard. I felt exterior, and I was just allowing the architect to express itself through my musical talent, which is fascinating.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. So, what roles did your wives play for you, or is that too personal of a question?
No, it's not. There's a double answer to that. Each of us incarnates for various lessons that each of us has to learn separate from our interactions. But as far as their relationship with my spiritual growth, both of them ended up being sort of mentors for me in the area of helping me with family, because I was one of those, practice all day, not be a family guy. And each of my wives were very family oriented, so they helped ground me in that area. And in a sense, they became mentors for me because their loss was so significant for me that the growth after their loss was so sped up and so on orders of magnitude incredible. So I knew that I chose that. And even this one Akashic reader said, "Boy, you had some big cojones to choose losing 2 wives in one lifetime." And she said, "Well, that's a good sign that you really, really, really wanted to grow. And how's that been working out for you?" I said, "Well, it's a double-edged sword. Sometimes I go, what was I thinking?" And on the other times I go, wow, that really sped up, because I'm like a way better person. So if there's a third soulmate out there for me, which a psychic reading said there is, they're going to inherit a much better person than I was before the first two.
Amazing. So, how did those relationships change you and help you to grow?
The biggest, I think the most incredible thing was the word love and affinity comes to mind. There's a song by the famous rock guitar player, Dave Mason. And he wrote a song called You Shouldn't Have Took More Than You Gave. And when you lose somebody, you don't really realize how important they were until you really lose them. And so in each case, the loss was so horrific and spiritual for me that I almost like had epileptic spiritual seizures, kind of like life reviews only while I'm living, as compared to crossing over and having a life review where you review your life to see how you did. I was granted the pain and at the same time the pleasure of learning from each of their losses, which increased my area to love and to be loved. So I appreciate love and to be loved so much more that every time I play or get up, I take nothing for granted. I just want to service others. A lot of the ego and the narcissism has been squeezed out of me. That's what it feels like. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so much sense. So let's move into the story of your second wife. There was an experience you had when you guys first began talking again, where she was going to come visit you on a plane. Could you share that story?
Yeah. In the meantime, the setup is I'd already been communicating to my first wife, and I'd already been in communication with the visible architect. So I already had that stuff going on. So before she contacted me, I was about a year into grieving on my first life, and my second wife, whose name was Barbara Simpson, came into my mind, and I sort of snickered, just getting over my first wife. And I said, well, I haven't seen her in 36 years since I've been 15 years. I know for some reason she's entered my space for a reason. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, I get an email from her. Hadn't seen her, talked to her for 36 years. So that was a premonition. And we started talking on the phone. And next thing you know, it was like a breath of fresh air. It's like the architect said, okay, your grieving days are over on your first life. Here's your next soulmate, right? And so it was really a breath of fresh air. So we started talking, and next thing you know, she wanted to come and see me, and I was dying to see her after 36 years. So she booked a flight, and about 6 days before her flight was due to fly out, the architect who I was always talking with, who I trusted, said, you got to call her up and tell her something's wrong with that day and something's wrong with that flight. She needs to cancel it and reschedule it. Now, that wasn't abnormal for me, but you can imagine how she thought. She was like, what? She told her sister, her mother, and they were thinking, he's just a widower and he's probably got somebody else and he's one of those jazz musicians. And I had to finally yell at her and over the phone. And I said, look, we don't know each other after 36 years. I've been very psychic. I'll explain that later. Just shut up and change the flight. So she changed the flight to 4 days later. That morning, I went to bed and there was no messages on my answer machine. I woke up, there was like 40 messages. I'd got up at 10:30, which is 1:30 back east where she lived in Virginia. And that was 9/11, and she was on the flight, one of the flights. And she changed it. She couldn't believe it. That was, and I took a win because that's normal for me. You know, I followed the voice.
All right.
And she booked another flight. And if that wasn't a tip for me to marry her, nothing would be, right?
Right. What a crazy story. And just like a real life account of someone who is going to be on that plane. And then you received psychic information that warned her ahead of time.
Right. And the funny thing is I don't even like to call it psychic. Psychic means you're getting some information somewhere, yeah. But in actual fact, it was just like you talking to me, since I'd already been in communication with the invisible architect, who's my spiritual bud, who's just talking to me again and saying, oh, by the way, have Barb change her flight. So it wasn't like I am psychic. It was just like the spiritual the architect just gave me a tip and I followed the tip. So from other people's point of view, it's probably psychic. For me, it's just like you calling me up and saying, "Hey, John," and telling me something. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay, this is a really heavy question, and if you want to skip it, we can. But I know that people in the comments are going to ask, what about all the other people on the planes or in the buildings? Were they given some kind of a warning, or why weren't they warned?
My answer to that is A, I don't know, right? And B, the ethics of that is separate for each person because each person reincarnates for different reasons, right? And obviously, her pre-soul agreements was it wasn't her time and we were supposed to meet. So that's why I was blessed with that communication and she was blessed with receiving it. As far as anybody else on the flight, I have no idea what their pre-birth agreements were. And, it could have been that somebody on that flight that didn't make it, their loss was an impetus and an inspiration for somebody else, a loved one that is in this dimension. So nobody can evaluate and judge each individual's journey other than your pre-soul agreements and when you cross over to do a life review.
Okay, thank you for answering that. I know it's a difficult question. So you've had some after-death communications from your second wife. Could you share about those?
Well, I had a similar one that I had with my first wife, Gloria. In fact, it was so similar, I was almost freaked out. I had a dream and I was trying to go out of body like I did with my first wife, and it was not working. I was really getting upset. And then one night I had a dream, and in the dream, I saw myself going into this big cathedral. And my wife was not a cathedral, a big mansion. My wife was a quasi-famous interior designer. And she always said when she went over there, she was gonna, if she was allowed to, design our perfect house. And when I came over, she would greet me. And so I saw her coming down the stairs. She looked about 35 years old, even though when she passed, she was 72 and looked really young. And my nickname, she called me Jasmine. So a little different twist. She looked over and I started walking up the stairs. She was near the bottom of the stairs and it was a different staircase. It was spiral. And she looked at me and she said, "Jasmine, wow." She put out her arms. It was a different greeting. And I got to actually run up the stairs and give her a big hug. And then within about 5 seconds, she goes, "But you can't stay. Oh, I wish you could." And she was almost crying that she had no control over that. And I went, "Oh, no, I don't know." And next thing you know, bingo, I'm back in my body, but I remembered everything.
Wow. So that was a little bit more of a warm reception from her.
Yeah. And I figured out through my own research and through a couple readings that she is my twin flame. And there's a difference between just soulmates and twin flames. If you read about it, there's a whole bunch of research about that. And we were really twin flames and we were meant to find each other in this lifetime and sort of mentor each other. So when she left, it was really, really heavy. In fact, it's still heavy. It's been 2.5 years and I don't think I'm 100% over it. And I don't think I will until the architect maybe sends me a soulmate, which I've been told is supposed to happen. Because when you're a twin flame, you're sort of carved out of the same energy signature. And so when they leave, you do feel a little empty compared to just a regular soulmate leaving. You know what I mean?
Interesting. So I've heard about the differences before, but I don't remember a lot of the details.
Yeah. Well, I can just tell you, it's a heavier relationship than normal. It's not that I didn't have an incredible relationship with my first wife. She was fantastic, but you really feel like you were one at one time, and now you're separate energy signatures, but you're still one, but you're separate. So when that other energy signature leaves, you feel part of you left as compared to just somebody you loved left.
Okay, that
And
makes sense.
that's the only way I can explain it, And apparently not everybody is so fortunate in the physical universe to meet up with their twin flame. And when you are, it's supposed to be a pretty amazing spiritual occasion, which I can attest is. It's just pretty amazing that how we even found each other in this lifetime, let alone hooked up in the way we hooked up. And then we spent 20 years together. So I spent 20 years with my first wife, a year in between, and then 20 years with my second wife. So it feels like 2 incarnations.
Wow, I can imagine. So have you had other communications from your second wife?
Yes. Yes. I haven't written a book about that because I'm not going to, because the first book covers that. But I've had several medium sessions in Akashic readings where she came through with not only advice, but explained why she had to leave, when she left, and a bunch of other personal things.
Wow. I'm so glad that you were able to have those communications. Did you find that it helped you to process?
It definitely helped me in this loss of the second wife, because since she was a twin flame, I was taking it really harder than even the first wife, and so the more info, I'm a knowledge freak. I've always been wanting information like a sponge. And so getting this kind of information on why she passed, when she passed, and some of her pre-soul agreements and some of mine, they never tell you everything because you still are living a life here and you still have to learn lessons. But whatever you can find out is very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, John, thank you so much for having this conversation. I would like to give you a chance to share with the viewers where they can find you and more about your book and anything else you have going on.
Fantastic. Like I said earlier, I now have this new career that I got thrown into after the book became famous and started selling, which I call Elite One-on-One Perfect Life Mentoring. So that website for people that want to communicate with me and talk to me about that, my whole goal is to help them hook up to this energy source so they can delegate that energy source helping them in their life. And so that website is go.johnnovelloauthor.com/register. go.johnnovelloauthor.com/register. And my main author site is just johnnovelloauthor.com. And my music site for music fans is keysnovello.com. That's KEYSNOVELLO.com. And I answer all the communications I get. And I'd love to talk to anybody that wants to.
Wonderful. I will have those links in the description. John, thank you so much for being willing to have this conversation and share from your personal experiences.
My pleasure, and thank you for what you do, because people like you help people like us share our stories, and I think that's important.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for watching and listening. Your views, likes, comments, and shares truly make the biggest difference in supporting this channel. Don't forget to check the show notes for all the links to today's guest, as well as my links. You'll find me on social media at Love Covered Life, my website, lovecoveredlife.com, and the Be a Guest link for anybody who would like to be a guest on the channel. I have great news. Love Covered Life podcast is coming available on audio podcasts. You can find it wherever you listen to your audio podcasts.